started like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Do you ever have one of those moments when you realize people aren't just petty, they're dangerous? That's what it felt like the morning two HOA board thugs blocked my concrete truck, yelled that I was breaking the law, and even took a swing at me. All because their little queen, Karen Fraser, decided my home was an eyesore. But they had no idea who they were playing with. By the time the day ended, their fake red tag would become my best evidence, and the sheriff would become my next guest. But that's jumping ahead. Let me rewind to where this circus began. Good evening, wherever you're watching from. My name's Bob Thornton, and a few months ago, a man pretending to be a state marshal slapped a counterfeit stop work notice on my half-built house. 10 minutes later, we had his badge, his emails, and a judge who would one day laugh him clear out of court. How did we get there? Believe it or not, it began with something simple. A husband and wife chasing a sunset. Ava and I never wanted luxury. We wanted peace. Just a quiet spot where we could drink coffee in the mornings and watch the valley turn gold at dusk. We found it on the ridge. Scruffy, sloped, half-forgotten land no developer wanted. But to us it was paradise. From up there you could see the whole world. Tiny rooftops below, silver rivers winding through town, and far-off mountains that glowed purple and orange every evening. It took years of saving and sketching, but at last we drew up plans, applied for permits, and got every single county approval. We followed the rules. Every rule. Apparently that was our first mistake, because some folks don't recognize any rule but their own. Ava and I lived by the county code. Karen Fraser and her crowd lived by a book written in invisible ink called HOA Authority. And according to their book, if they could see it, they could rule it. The first shot in their little war came on thick letterhead that screamed importance. It read, "Your proposed structure disrupts the established view corridor of our community." View corridor? Sounded like airport talk. I called Stan in the county planning office, a man whose voice always sounded one yawn away from retirement. He chuckled. "There's no such law in this county, Mr. Thornton. Unless someone has a public easement, that view belongs to whoever owns the dirt. You're outside HOA jurisdiction, right?" He checked the plat. "Yep, you're clean. Their rules stop 2 lots shy of your ridge. Build away." And with that I filed the fancy letter straight into the trash. The circular archive. The next week, we broke ground. Then came Karen. The president herself rolled up the hill like royalty on a mission, steering a gleaming golf cart that looked like it had been waxed by angels. She wore tennis whites, a diamond visor, and an expression polished to perfection. I was standing ankle-deep in mud, holding a shovel, sweat streaking down my face. The picture of two very different worlds. "I'm Karen Fraser, president of the HOA, she announced. "We have a serious problem." I wasn't in the mood for royal decrees. "County said we're fine," I told her. "We're outside your jurisdiction." Her hand fluttered through the air, dismissive, as if shooing away a harmless insect. "The county doesn't understand the aesthetic fabric of this community," she said sweetly. "Which is HOA language for we make up reality as we go." She pulled out a thick binder and dropped it into my dust-covered hands. "These are our covenants. You should have read them." I flipped through. "Pretty sure these don't cover land you don't own," I said. Her smile narrowed to a blade. "They do when I say they do." I might have added something about not planning to install a lawn or mailbox for at least 6 months. That shut the smile off completely. "Expect a letter from our legal team," she hissed, then zipped away in her silent, angry chariot. I kept building. Foundation poured. Rebar set. Every beam carried a piece of Ava and me, her laughter, my sweat, the shared dream of a home we built ourselves. She'd bring sandwiches around noon, and we'd sit on the tailgate eating, watching clouds drift over that view we loved so much. Life was good again for a brief heartbeat. Then the letters started. Certified mail, thick envelopes, lawyer grammar. Cease and desist. Violation of community aesthetic directive. My own attorney, a practical man, told me to ignore them. "They've got no jurisdiction, Bob. They're just puffing smoke." Maybe so, but smoke still stings the eyes. The neighbors changed too. Some still waved. Others just stared or looked away. Rumors crawled through the grapevine. They started calling us the Sunset Thieves. Then came the Tuesday I met Marshall Johnson. I was on the subfloor hammering plywood when a dusty sedan pulled up. Out stepped a man who looked like a substitute teacher trying to play police officer. Cheap blue windbreaker, dress slacks, shoes that had seen better decades, and a frown that didn't quite fit his face. "Bob Thornton?" he called, voice squeaky with effort. "That's me, no handshake. Just a flash of a leather badge case, too quick to read. Then the words, State Compliance Office. He held out a clipboard like a sword. "You've been reported for unpermitted grading and obstruction of community view." I stared. "State what now?" We don't have marshals here, only county inspectors. And you're not one of them. He ignored me, marched past, and slapped a bright red notice on my doorframe. Huge black letters screamed, "Stop work order. All construction must cease immediately," he announced. Violations subject to fines up to $10,000 a day. My blood went from ice to lava. He was bluffing, and I knew it. County inspectors don't drive dented sedans or hide their IDs. And they never call themselves marshal. "Let me see that badge again," I said, stepping closer. His eyes darted like a cornered animal's. "Sir, step back." But his voice cracked, and that's when I knew. Pure imposter. "Hand it over." He bolted. 1 second he was fumbling his folder. The next he was sprinting for his car, cheap soles slipping in gravel. Years of working construction had blessed me with lousy luck but excellent reflexes. 2 strides, and I caught his jacket. The thin fabric tore like paper. He yelped, stumbled, dropping his clipboard and folder. Pages scattered across the dirt like white feathers in a storm. He swung wildly. I ducked and gave him a shove that pinned him against his car door. "You picked the wrong site, Marshal." The dash cam on my trailer caught everything. Sound, timestamp, and crystal clear angle. His face went pale. "Stay away from me," he squeaked, diving into his car and peeling out. Tires spitting dust and papers behind him. When the cough of his engine faded, all that remained was the red tag fluttering on my door and my own heart pounding like a drum. Ava rushed from the trailer. "Bob, are you okay?" I pointed to the mess on the ground. "Help me grab those." We crouched together in the dust, collecting the scattered pages. Some were blank forms, but others were gold. In the torn folder's pocket, I found an email chain printed out. At the top was Karen Fraser, bold as daylight. Below, her vice chair, Gary Whitman. The subject read, "The Thornton Problem." And there it was, the smoking gun. The last line in bold, heat-pressed rage. "Just make it look official. Make it scary for them. They need to understand we're serious." Ava froze. Her face turned pale as paper. She looked from the page to me. "This isn't just a dispute anymore," she whispered. "This is a conspiracy." Her words landed heavy. Because she was right. This wasn't neighborhood politics now. It was fraud, intimidation, and probably half a dozen other crimes waiting for daylight. I stood there in the swirl of dust left by that fake marshal's tires, my hands shaking with leftover adrenaline. The red tag hung crooked on my doorframe, bright and smug, like a scarlet insult pinned to our dream. The first instinct that hit me was rage, pure, unrefined rage. I wanted to crush that tag under my boot, drive to Karen Fraser's fancy house, and give her a lesson she'd never forget. But then I looked at Ava. She was calm, not happy, not scared, but focused. She was already separating the papers the guy had dropped, her mind working. Ava is my rock. I'm the stubborn mule who pushes the boulder. She's the engineer who tells me where to push. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "First things first, don't touch that tag. It's evidence. Second, call the sheriff. Not 911, the non-emergency line. We're not in immediate danger anymore. What we are is victims of a crime." Her clarity cut through my anger like a cold knife. She was right. This wasn't a fist fight I could win. This was something else. This was their field, their game. But we had to play. I made the call. I explained the situation as calmly as I could to the dispatcher. A man impersonating an official, a physical altercation, and evidence left at the scene. They said a deputy would be out. While we waited, Ava went to work. She took out her phone and began photographing everything. The red tag from every angle. The tire tracks from the fake marshal's car. The scattered papers on the ground. The rip in the windbreaker fragment I was still holding. She documented the scene with the precision of a crime scene investigator. "Chain of custody, Bob," she said, not looking up from her phone. "It starts now. Everything they do, everything we find, we document it. Time, date, photo description. We build a file so thick they can't weasel their way out of it." I've always known she was smart, but in that moment, I saw a different side of her. A fierce, protective, and incredibly methodical warrior. Our little construction project had just turned into a war room, and she was our general. A half hour later, a county sheriff's cruiser rolled up the driveway. The deputy who got out was young, but he had a look of steady confidence about him. His name was Deputy Miller. I walked him through the whole story, from the HOA's initial threats to the man in the windbreaker. It showed him the email I'd found. He read it, his expression hardening. "Make it scary for them," he read aloud, then looked up at me. Well, I'd say he succeeded. He walked over to the doorframe and examined the red tag. He touched the corner of it, then shook his head. "This is a joke," he said. "The paper is wrong. The font is off. And there's no county seal or case number. And the signature block is blank. This thing is about as official as a kids' hall pass." He peeled it off the doorframe carefully and slid it into a large evidence bag. He then collected the rest of the scattered papers, including the damning email chain. He spent the next hour with us taking detailed statements. He took my ripped piece of windbreaker. He measured the tire tracks. He was thorough. When he was done, he handed me a card with an incident report number on it. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "I'm filing a report for assault, trespassing, and impersonating a public official. That last one is a felony. The email you found is huge. It establishes intent and conspiracy. This isn't just some random guy. He was sent. We'll run the license plate number if you got it. I hadn't. It all happened too fast. A neighbor's doorbell cam did. Miller said they'd pull it." "Don't worry," Miller said. "They're rarely smart. We'll find him." He looked around at our half-built house at the incredible view and then back at us. "People get crazy about views," he said with a sigh. "But this is a whole other level. My advice, be careful and get cameras. Get a lot of them." After he left, the silence felt heavy. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling feeling. We weren't just fighting an annoying HOA president anymore. We were fighting a group of people who were willing to commit felonies to get what they wanted. They had tried to intimidate us with a fake official. They had sent someone who got physical with me on my own property. The line had been crossed. The question of when to stand your ground versus when to call the cops had been answered for us. We had done both. We stood our ground and then we called the law. Now we were officially in the system. Our little property dispute had an incident report number. It felt both reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because the law was on our side. Terrifying because we now knew just how far our opponents were willing to go. That night, Ava was on her computer for hours ordering a state-of-the-art security system. Not the kind you buy at a big box store. This was a professional-grade setup. High-resolution cameras, night vision, motion sensors, and a cloud-based recording system with its own battery backup. "They want to play dirty?" "Bob," she said, her eyes glowing in the light of the monitor. "Fine, we'll play smart. From now on, every inch of this property is under surveillance. If a rabbit sneezes out here, I want to have it on video in high definition." The cost made me wuss, but I knew she was right. It was an investment in our safety and our case. We were no longer just building a house. We were fortifying a position. The next day, while I got back to work, defiantly hammering and sawing with a new grim determination, Ava oversaw the installation of the cameras. The technician was a quiet man who seemed to understand the situation without needing much explanation. He placed the cameras in strategic overlapping fields of fire. By the end of the day, we had a digital fortress. From Ava's laptop, we could see the whole property day or night. It felt like a strange kind of comfort watching ourselves on the screen. We were exposed, but we were also watching back. The incident with the fake marshal had changed the game. We now had a police report and a file full of evidence. We knew they were criminals, but that knowledge didn't make them go away. It just made us wonder with a knot of dread in our stomachs what they were going to try next. Now that their attempt at fake legal intimidation had failed, what would be their next move? The cameras went live on a Thursday. For the first few nights, it was almost boring. We watched deer wander across the property. We saw a raccoon try and fail to get into our trash bin. It was a high-tech nature show. Ava set up motion alerts on her phone so we'd get a ping if anything moved in a designated zone. It gave us a sliver of peace. We felt like we had eyes everywhere. The quiet, however, was unnerving. Karen Fraser and her crew had gone silent. No more letters. No more angry golf cart drive-bys. It was the silence of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew they hadn't given up. People like Karen don't give up. They just changed tactics. The fake marshal had been their attempt at a shock and awe campaign. It failed. Now I figured they'd move on to a campaign of attrition, of quiet sabotage. The first alert came just after 2:00 in the morning on Sunday. Ava's phone chirped on the nightstand. We both sat bolt upright in bed. My heart was hammering. Ava grabbed her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She pulled up the live feed from the camera covering the eastern property line. Theone closest to our most vocal complainer, a board member named Gary. The screen was black and white, bathed in the eerie, ethereal glow of the infrared. At first we saw nothing. Then a flicker of movement near the corner of the property. 2 figures dressed in dark hoodies moving low and fast. They were carrying something. Ava zoomed in. The image was grainy, but clear enough. It was Gary and another guy from the HOA board, a sycophant named Ted. They were carrying our survey stakes, the wooden posts with the bright pink plastic ribbons that marked the legal boundary of our land. We watched, breathless, as they worked. They moved with a practiced silence like they had planned this. One would pull a stake from the ground where the licensed surveyor had placed it, and the other would hammer it back into the earth about 5 ft inside our property line. They moved down the line, stake by stake, methodically stealing our land in the dead of night. 5T here, 5T there. It wasn't much, but it was everything. They were literally redrawing the map. They were trying to create a fact on the ground. They could later claim that we were the ones who were building over the line that our foundation was encroaching. It was insidious. It was brilliant in its own evil way. It was the kind of lie that if you didn't have proof would turn into a messy, he said. She said that could tie us up in court for years. My first thought was to run out there to scream and yell and confront them. I started to get out of bed, every muscle in my body coiled with rage. But Ava put a hand on my arm. No, Bob, stay here. Her voice was ice. Let them finish. Let them do it all. We have them. I looked at the screen at these two middle-aged men in their suburban dad clothes, acting like common thieves under the cover of darkness. They thought they were so clever. They had no idea they were the stars of their very own crime movie. Ava saved the file, logged time, camera, GPS, then mirrored it to 2 drives and a cloud backup. She was building her fortress of evidence, brick by digital brick. Every stake they move is another count of vandalism. Another piece of the conspiracy puzzle for the police, she murmured, her eyes glued to the screen. We watched for 20 minutes as they moved the entire line of stakes. When they were done, they gave each other a quiet high five, a pathetic little gesture of victory in the ghostly infrared light. They looked around, thinking they were alone, and then skewered back off into the darkness from which they came. The property was quiet again, but it was changed. The boundaries were wrong. Ailey had been physically planted in our soil. Without the video, it would have been our word against theirs. The word of the new people against 2 established members of the community. But we had the video, and the video didn't lie. The next morning, I went out with our copy of the official survey map. I walked the new fraudulent property line they had created. It felt profoundly violating, more so than the fake marshal. This was a physical attack on our home on the very ground beneath our feet. They were trying to shrink our world, to squeeze us out 5 ifs at a time. I called the surveyor's office and left a message. Then I called Deputy Miller and gave him an update, referencing our case number. I told him we had clear video evidence of vandalism and trespassing. He sounded grimly satisfied. Keep that video safe, Mr. Thornton. We're building a very interesting file on your new neighbors. The quiet war had now moved to a new front. They had failed with fake laws, so now they were trying to create fake facts. They were not just trying to scare us off our land anymore. They were literally trying to steal it, one survey stake at a time. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They were so arrogant, so sure of their own power within their little kingdom, that they believed they could literally reshape reality to suit their desires. But they didn't know about Ava. They didn't know about the silent, sleepless eyes of our cameras. They thought they were moving stakes in the dark. In reality, they were walking straight into a trap we hadn't even known we'd set. The evidence file was growing, but so was the pit in my stomach. What would they do when they found out their little trick had been discovered? What comes after vandalism? The answer, I would soon find out, was direct physical confrontation. The morning of the concrete pour was supposed to be a good day. It was a millstone. After weeks of digging, grading, and laying rebar, we were finally going to have a foundation, a real solid base for our home. It was a Tuesday, and the trucks were scheduled to arrive at 8 so sharp. I was out there at sunrise walking the forms one last time, feeling a sense of hope I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, if we kept our heads down and kept building, they would see we weren't going to be scared off. Maybe they'd just give up. I should have known better. People like Karen Fraser don't know how to give up. They only know how to escalate. At 5 minutes to 8, I heard the rumble of the first concrete truck coming up the road. It was a big, heavy mixer churning away, ready to give our house its bones. But as it neared the entrance to our driveway, it slowed and then stopped. I heard the hiss of its air brakes. I walked to the end of the driveway to see what the holdup was, and my heart sank. A neat little line of bright orange traffic cones had been placed across the entrance to our lot. Standing behind the cones with their arms crossed like a couple of low rent bouncers were Karen's 2 stooges, Gary and Ted, the stake movers. They were both wearing matching HOA polo shirts, as if that made their little roadblock official. The truck driver, a big guy with a grizzled beard, leaned out of his cab. "Hey, you got a problem here?" he yelled down to me. "I got a load of mud here that's starting to cook. Concrete waits for no man. Ethos a life of its own. Once it's mixed, the clock is ticking. You either pour it or you own a very expensive, very heavy rock." I walked up to the cones. "Morning, fellas," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Going to need you to move these. I have a house to pour." Gary smirked. It was a smug, punchable look. "Sorry, Bob," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "The HOA Safety Committee has determined that this level of construction traffic poses an unacceptable risk to our community's pedestrian-friendly roadways. We're going to have to ask your truck to leave." It was so ridiculous it was almost funny. A self-appointed safety committee of 2 was blockading a fully permitted construction project. "You're kidding me, right?" I said. "Gary, I have you on camera moving my survey stakes 2 nights ago. You really want to push this?" His smirk faltered for a second. Fear flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a belligerent anger. Ted, the weaker of the 2, just looked nervous. "I don't know what you're talking about," Gary blustered. "Now, are you going to tell your driver to leave, or are we going to have a problem?" The truck driver honked his horn, a long, impatient blast. The clock was ticking. This wasn't just about harassment anymore. This was about money. A truckload of wasted concrete costs thousands of dollars. Delaying the project costs even more. This was a direct shot at my wallet. "I'm not asking you again," I said, my voice dropping. "Move the cones." I took a step forward and kicked one of the cones aside. That's when it all went sideways. Gary shoved me. It wasn't a little push. It was a full body, 2-handed shove to the chest that sent me stumbling back a few steps. "You're not coming through here," he shouted, his face turning red. "I'm not a fighter. I haven't been in aerial fights since I was a kid. But when a man puts his hands on you on your own property, trying to stop you from building your own home, something primal kicks in." I shoved him back harder. "Get off my land!" I roared. Hess stumbled but didn't fall. He came back at me, and this time he swung. It was a wild telegraphed punch, and I managed to duck most of it, but his knuckles grazed my cheekbone. It stung, a sharp, surprising burst of pain. The truck driver was yelling something from his cab. Ted was just standing there, his mouth hanging open like a fish. And then Gary's friend, Ted, the follower, decided to be brave. He grabbed my arm from the side. Now it was 2-on. I tried to shake him off, and as I turned, Gary saw his opening. He stepped in and threw another punch. A solid right hook that caught me square on the jaw. My head snapped back. Stars exploded behind my eyes for a second, and I tasted blood. Blood ran warm on my lip. My cheekbone puffed like bread dough. I staggered back and fell, my butt hitting the dusty ground with a hard thud. My jaw throbbed with a deep electric pain. My cheek went purple fast. Lip bled onto my shirt. From the ground, I saw the truck driver climbing down from his cab. He was a lot bigger up close. "That's it," he boomed, his voice like rolling thunder. "You 2 clowns just assaulted a man. I'm calling the cops, and I'm a witness." Gary and Ted froze. The sight of the massive truck driver advancing on them, phone in his hand, seemed to finally penetrate their bubble of self-righteousness. They looked at me on the ground, then at each other. Panic washed over their faces. Without another word, they turned and practically ran down the street, leaving their stupid orange cones behind. The truck driver helped me up. "You all right, man?" he asked, his anger replaced by concern. "Yeah," I said, touching my jaw tenderly. It was already starting to swell. "I'll live." He shook his head. "I've been doing this for 30 years, he said. "I've seen some crazy HOA nonsense, but I ain't never seen anything like this. You need me to stick around and give a statement?" I told him I did, and I was grateful. The concrete was a lost cause. By the time the sheriff arrived and we'd given our statements, the load had hardened in the truck. It was a total financial loss. But as I stood there holding an ice pack to my face that Ava had brought out, I knew we had gained something far more valuable. We now had a credible third-party witness to a physical assault. We had Gary and Ted red-handed, escalating from petty vandalism to outright violence. They had drawn first blood, and they had done it in broad daylight in front of a witness. They were getting sloppy. They were getting desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. My joacht, my head was spinning, and I was out a lot of money. But as I looked at the pathetic orange cone still sitting on the side of the road, I felt a grim sense of resolve. They had punched me in the face. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. This wasn't about a view anymore. This was about bullies who thought they could get away with anything. And I was going to make damn sure they didn't. They think they can use their fists. Fine. We'll use the law, and we'll hit them a whole lot harder. The punch to the face was a turning point. It made things crystal clear. Before it was a war of nerves, of intimidation and petty sabotage. Now it was physical. They had put their hands on me. Deputy Miller, when he took my statement, was all business. The swelling on my jaw was all the evidence he needed of the assault, and the truck driver's testimony sealed it. Warrants were issued for Gary and Ted. But things like that take time. In the meantime, we were living on a battleground. The cameras became our shield, our silent guardians. Ava had the feeds up on a monitor in our trailer almost constantly. We felt like we were under siege. Karen and her crew knew they had messed up. They knew the assault was a serious escalation, one with independent witnesses. The silence turned heavy, menacing. They knew our cameras had seen the stake-moving incident. They must have suspected we had cameras covering the driveway where the assault happened, so they decided to blind us. It happened on a Wednesday night just after midnight. We were asleep when Ava's phone started buzzing frantically on the nightstand. It wasn't the gentle chirp of a motion alert. This was a continuous frantic vibration, a system failure alarm. "They're down," she said, her voice tight with alarm as she grabbed her laptop. All the exterior cameras just went offline. All at once, I felt a jolt of ice in my veins. Being blind is the worst feeling in a fight. The cameras were our eyes, our early warning system. Without them, we were just two people in a trailer on an isolated patch of dirt, surrounded by people who hated us. "How?" I asked, my mind racing. "Did they cut the internet cable?" Ava was typing furiously, her face illuminated by the screen. "No, the internet is fine. It's the power. The cameras are hardwired for power. The whole circuit is dead." My stomach twisted into a knot. Someone was out there right now in the dark. Someone had gotten close enough to our trailer to cut the power lines feeding the security system. I got up and went to the window, peering out into the inky blackness. I couldn't see anything. The feeling of vulnerability was suffocating. They could be anywhere. They could be doing anything. They could be right outside the door. For the first time in this whole ordeal, I felt a genuine flicker of fear. Not just anger, but real gut-churning fear for our safety. They had assaulted me in broad daylight. What would they do under the cover of total darkness? I turned back to Ava, ready to suggest we just get in the truck and leave. Go to a hotel. But she wasn't panicking. She had a strange, fierce little smile on her face. "They're smart," she said, almost to herself. "They found the junction box, but they're not smart enough." Then she hit a key on her laptop, and like magic, the screen flickered to life. One by one, the camera feeds reappeared. The driveway, the property line, the front door, the eerie black and white infrared images were back. Our eyes were open again. "How?" I whispered, stunned. She pointed to a small, unassuming box under her desk. "Battery backup and a dedicated cellular uplink," she said, her smile widening. "When I ordered the system, I paid extra for the failsafe package. When the main power is cut, it automatically switches to a 24-hour deep cycle battery and LTE failover that pushes video the moment mains drop. They didn't just cut the power, Bob. They triggered the backup system." Her foresight was incredible. She had anticipated their move before they even made it. She brought up the recording from the moments just before the blackout. We watched the feed from the camera pointed at the side of our trailer where the main power junction box was located. It's on the trailer's shaded side 10 FT off the ground. They hopped the side fence. Fresh prints marked the gravel below the box. A figure in a dark hoodie crept into the frame. He carried a pair of bolt cutters. He was clumsy, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. He reached the box, pried it open, and with a few quick snips, cut the wires. The screen went black for a second, and then Ava switched to the recording from the backup system, which had kicked in instantly. The man in the hoodie was still there. Thinking he was now invisible, he stood up, and for a perfect crystal-clear moment, he looked directly up at the camera he thought was dead. It was Ted. The same Ted who had grabbed my arm during the assault at the roadblock. He had a stupid, triumphant grin on his face. We had him dead to rights. Not just trespassing and destruction of property, but tampering with a security system, which, as we would later find out, added a whole other layer of legal trouble for him. He thought he had blinded us, but instead he had given us the perfect hide-a-fiend portrait of his own stupidity. Ava saved the clip, backed it up 3 times, and emailed it to Deputy Miller with the subject line, "Look who came to visit." The fear I had felt just moments before was gone, replaced by a profound sense of admiration for my wife. They were playing checkers, and she was playing 10-dimensional chess. They brought fists and bolt cutters. We brought foresight and technology. This was a critical moment. They had tried to isolate us, to make us feel helpless and afraid in the dark, and they had failed spectacularly. Their arrogance was once again their undoing. They underestimated us. They saw a stubborn guy with a hammer and thought that was all there was to it. They didn't see the quiet, brilliant woman in the trailer behind him, anticipating their every move and turning their own aggression into a weapon against them. They thought they had cut our power, but all they had really done was empower us even more, handing us another perfect piece of evidence, another nail for their own legal coffin. The game was escalating, but we were still in it, and I was beginning to realize that as long as I had Ava on my side, we couldn't lose. The day after Ted's failed attempt to blind us, an email showed up in Ava's inbox. Truth, that night I googled cell lot fast. I closed the tab, angry at myself. It was from a weird anonymous address, a string of random numbers and letters. The subject line was just one word, proof. Normally we would have deleted it on the spot, but given everything that was happening, Avo penned it. She verified metadata, real board accounts, real timestamps. It contained no text, just 3 image files. They were screenshots. Screenshots of a private group chat for the HOA board, and reading them felt like looking directly into the heart of their rotten little conspiracy. The names were all there. Karen Fraser, Gary, Ted, and a few others. The conversation was a timeline of their entire campaign against us. The first screenshot was from weeks ago, right after Karen's first visit. Her message read, "The new owners on the ridge are not cooperating. They are very stubborn. We need to apply pressure." Gary replied, "Legal letters are a good start. Let's paper them to death." The second screenshot was from the day before the fake marshal showed up. "This was the smoking gun," Karen wrote. "The legal approach isn't working. We need to escalate something to make them understand this is not a game." Gary's reply was chilling. "My cousin's husband does some private security work. He can look official. Let's get him to post a stop work order. Make it very bad for them. Red tag, big fines, the works. Scare them off the project for good." There it was in black and white. A premeditated, coordinated plan to impersonate an official. But the third screenshot was the worst. It was from the night Ted cut our power. The conversation started right after the assault at the concrete blockade. Karen was furious. "The police have been called. Gary and Ted might be charged. This has gone too far." But Gary's response wasn't remorse. It was rage. "They have cameras, Karen. I saw them. They probably have the whole thing on video. We have to shut them down." Then came the message from Karen that made my blood run cold. "Do what you have to do. Cut their utilities. Make them feel unsafe. They need to go. Whatever it takes." It was a direct order, a green light for the criminal activity that followed just hours later. It was a conspiracy laid out in plain text. We just sat there staring at the screen in stunned silence. This was the playbook, the whole ugly, sordid thing. It wasn't just a few rogue board members. It was orchestrated from the top by Karen Fraser herself. Whatever it takes. That phrase echoed in my head. It meant there were no limits, no rules they wouldn't break. Who sent this to us? A board member with a guilty conscience? A spouse who saw it on a shared computer? We'd never know. But someone on the inside had decided to jump ship. Someone knew this was crossing a line and wanted out. Ava immediately saved the screenshots, backed them up, and forwarded the entire email to Deputy Miller and our lawyer. Our lawyer called within minutes. "This is it," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "This is the ball game. This is evidence of a civil conspiracy. We can sue them all personally, not just the HOA. We can go after their houses, their bank accounts. This changes everything." Suddenly, a lot of little things started to make sense. I thought about my neighbor a few lots down. Neighbor Nate. He was a quiet guy, mostly kept to himself, but he was always friendly. He'd always give me a wave. But for the last few weeks, he'd seemed nervous. He'd avoid eye contact. The other day, I saw him talking to Karen Fraser on the street. He looked agitated. She looked like she was lecturing him. Nate's wife was on the HOA's Architectural Review Committee. Maybe he had seen or heard something. Maybe he was the one who sent the email. I made a mental note to just give him a simple, knowing nod the next time I saw him. No words, just a sign that I understood and was grateful. The leaked chat messages shifted our perspective entirely. We weren't just victims anymore. We were holding the keys to their destruction. We had the video of the stake moving. We had the witness to the assault. We had the video of the power line cutting. And now we had their own words, their own written confession, tying it all together. It was a beautiful, perfect case. But it also made me realize the depth of their delusion. They felt so untouchable, so protected by their little HOA bubble that they put their criminal plans in writing. They thought the rules didn't apply to them. They believed that wanting a better view gave them the right to harass, assault, and conspire against a family just trying to build a home. We had a moral crossroads right there. We had enough evidence to destroy them in civil court, and likely get them convicted of multiple crimes. We could have leaked the chats to the local news, shamed them publicly, and turned the entire neighborhood against them. But that wasn't our style. We weren't looking for revenge. We were looking for justice. We decided to keep the chat logs close to the vest, sharing them only with our lawyer and the police. We would let the system work. We would present our evidence in a calm, methodical way. We would beat them not by stooping to their level, but by rising above it, armed with the simple, undeniable truth. The chat logs were our ace in the hole, and we knew that when the time was right, we would play that card, and it would bring their entire house of cards tumbling down. They wanted to make it bad for us. They had no idea how bad we were about to make it for them simply by showing the world who they really were. With the leaked chat logs, we finally had the full picture. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. But not with fists or threats, with facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. The entire foundation of Karen Fraser's argument, the flimsy excuse for all her harassment, was the idea that our house violated a view corridor. We knew from the county that this wasn't a real legal thing. But we had to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that our house was exactly where it was supposed to be, and as tall as it was allowed to be. We needed to bring in the heavy guns, Our lawyer recommended we hire a licensed county surveyor and a geographic information systems or GIS technician. It was another expense, but it was a necessary one. We needed a report so official, so ironclad that it couldn't be argued with. A few days later, a team showed up. They didn't look like Gary and Ted sneaking around in the dark. They had a truck full of high-tech equipment, tripods, laser scanners, GPS antennas. They spent an entire day on our property. The surveyor, a serious man named Mr. Evans, used his instruments to locate the original official property markers. The metal pins recorded monuments beat, moved wood, every time buried deep where you can't fake them. He meticulously measured the boundaries, his work a quiet, precise ballet of science. He confirmed what we already knew. The stakes Gary and Ted had moved were indeed 5 ft inside our actual property line. They had attempted to steal a 5 ft wide strip of our land. While he worked, the GIS technician was busy building a 3D model of the entire area. He used a drone to get aerial imagery and a laser scanner to map the topography down to the centimeter. He mapped our foundation. He mapped the exact location and height of Karen, Fraser's house and Gary's house and every other house that supposedly had its view blocked. It was fascinating to watch. He was building a digital replica of our world, a world made of pure data, a world where opinions and feelings didn't matter, only elevation points and coordinates. A week later, the report arrived. It was a thick, bound document full of maps, charts, and technical language, but the summary on the first page was all we needed. It stated in the driest, most official language possible 3 simple things. 1. Our property boundaries were exactly as we had claimed, and the survey stakes had been deliberately moved inward. 2. The foundation of our house was located entirely within our property lines and complied with all county setback requirements. 3. And this was the killer. The GIS analysis of the sightlines proved that even after our house was built to its fully permitted height, it would not significantly obstruct the primary sunset view from any of the complaining properties. The analysis showed that their view of the most scenic part of the valley and the mountains remained almost completely untouched. The part of the view our house would occupy was mostly just the roof of the house down the hill from us. Their entire premise was a lie, a complete fabrication. They weren't fighting to save a cherished community view. They were fighting because they didn't want to see our roof. It was that petty, that small. All this harassment, the assaults, the conspiracies, all of it was based on a lie they had told themselves and everyone else. They weren't noble crusaders protecting the neighborhood's beauty. They were just bullies who didn't like the idea of having a new neighbor. The report was our silver bullet. It was an objective, scientific, and legally unimpeachable document that vaporized their entire case. We now had the law on our side with the police reports. We had the evidence on our side with AA's video sand, the leaked chats. And now we had the science on our side with the surveyor's report. They had nothing left to stand in but their own arrogance. We sent a copy of the report to their lawyer, along with a notice of our intent to countersue for damages, including the cost of the wasted concrete, the security system, the survey, and our legal fees. We also included a bill for the strip of land they had tried to steal, calculated at the premium local rate. We thought that this surely would be the end of it. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence against them, any sane person would have folded, apologized, and tried to make a deal. But we were not dealing with sane people. We were dealing with Karen Fraser, and she was not about to let a little thing like the truth get in the way of her crusade. The report didn't make them back down. It made them desperate, and their desperation was about to take a very ugly, very personal turn. We had the facts, but they still had the power to make our lives a living hell while we waited for our day in court. The surveyor's report should have been the end of it. Checkmate. But Karen Fraser wasn't a chess player. She was the kind of person who, when she's losing a game, just flips the board over. The official court date was set, and in the weeks leading up to it, the psychological warfare began. They knew they couldn't win on the facts, so they tried to break us down emotionally. The first move was an official-looking letter from their lawyer. It wasn't a surrender. It was a low-ball buyout offer. They offered us exactly what we had paid for the undeveloped land with Asmall insulting premium to cover our troubles. The letter was dripping with condescending language, framing the offer as a generous opportunity for us to exit a difficult situation and restore peace to the community. The peace they had shattered, the difficult situation they had created. They wanted to buy our dream for pennies on the dollar after they had tried to turn it into a nightmare. Ava and I had a good laugh, tore the letter into tiny pieces, and mailed it back to their lawyer in a business envelope with no return address. Then the petty stuff started. Nasty anonymous notes left on the windshield of our truck. "View thieves go home. Nobody wants you here." One morning, we woke up to find that someone had thrown a carton of eggs at the side of our trailer. It was juvenile, pathetic stuff. but it was designed to wear us down, to make us feel isolated and unwelcome. Every trip to the local grocery store became an exercise in avoiding the glares of Karen's cronies. The pressure was constant, a low-grade hum of hostility that followed us everywhere. They were trying to make us so miserable that we would just give up and leave before we ever got to court. I'm a stubborn man, but I'm not immune to stress. The constant vigilance was exhausting. I wasn't sleeping well. Every little noise at night made me jump. But one evening, as we were sitting on our tailgate, watching another spectacular sunset paint the sky, I had an idea. It was a petty idea, a ridiculous idea, and it was perfect. They're angry because they think we're hoarding the sunset, I said to Ava. They think this view belongs to them, and we've stolen it. She nodded, watching the last sliver of sun dip behind the mountains. So, I continued, a slow grin spreading across my face. What if we gave it back to them? What if we shared it so much they got sick of it? The next Saturday, I put my plan into action. I went out and bought a decent digital projector and a big portable movie screen. As dusk approached, I set up the screen at the end of our driveway, right on the edge of the street. I aimed the projector at it. Then, I set up a high-definition camera on a tripod pointed directly at the western sky. I ran a cable from the camera to the projector. As the sun began to set, the most beautiful, vibrant, real-time image of the sunset appeared on the massive screen for the entire street to see. It was a live broadcast of the very thing they accused us of stealing. But it didn't stop there. I brought out 2 big speakers and pointed them at the street. I put on a peaceful instrumental soundtrack. I set up a couple of lawn chairs, and Ava brought out a big thermos of hot cocoa and a plate of cookies. We put up a small hand-painted sign that read, "Free sunset, all welcome." We just sat there sipping our cocoa, watching the real sunset in front of us and the giant projected sunset behind us. At first, people just drove by slowly, confused. Then, a few of our friendlier neighbors, including neighbor Nate, wandered over, curious. We offered them cocoa. Soon, we had a small crowd. Kids came out to watch the big TV. People were chatting, laughing. For one evening, our little patch of dirt wasn't a battleground. It was a neighborhood block party. We saw Karen Fraser's golf cart come up the street. It stopped about 100 yards away, sitting in the gathering twilight like a malevolent beetle. She just watched us, watched her neighbors mingling on our property, sharing a moment of peace and beauty. Watched them enjoying the very thing she was trying to claim as her own private property. She couldn't stand it. The image of her neighbors laughing and drinking cocoa with her sworn enemies, all while watching a giant 12-foot-high version of the sunset she was suing us over, was too much for her. She spun the golf cart around with a squeal of tires and sped off into the darkness. Someone whispered, "Tell the sun to file a permit," and the whole block snorted. We had won the battle of the day without saying a single mean word. We had used our own obsession against her. We had turned her weapon into a party favor. It was a small, petty act of revenge, but it felt like a major victory. It broke the tension. It reminded us and our neighbors that what we were fighting for wasn't just a piece of land. We were fighting against the idea that one person's selfishness could be allowed to poison an entire community. The sunset doesn't belong to anyone. It's for everyone. And by sharing it in the most ridiculously public way possible, we had exposed her campaign for what it was, not a crusade, but a petty, selfish tantrum. The court date was still a week away, and we knew the real fight was still ahead. But as we packed up our screen and chairs in the dark, surrounded by the friendly good nights of our neighbors, we felt stronger than ever. They wanted to break us, but all they had done was bring us closer to the very community they claimed to represent. The day we walked into the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fight was out of our hands now. We had done everything we could. We had the evidence, we had the facts, and we had the truth on our side. Ava had organized everything into a series of thick binders, one for each of our key pieces of evidence, all perfectly tabbed and cross-referenced. She looked like a seasoned paralegal. I just looked like a guy with a slightly crooked jaw that still HED when the weather was damp. Karen Fraser and her crew were already there, huddled with their lawyer. They looked smug and confident like they owned the place. Their lawyer was a slickle-looking guy in an expensive suit. He gave us a dismissive glance as we sat down. The case was being heard by Judge Rollins, an older judge with a reputation for being sharp, impatient, and having no tolerance for nonsense. This gave me a sliver of hope. Our case was simple. Theirs was pure nonsense. When the proceedings began, the HOA's lawyer went first. He was all bluster and performance. He talked about the sacred character of the community, the fragile aesthetic that we were trampling. He painted us as greedy outsiders who had no respect for their neighbors. It was a good story if he didn't know any of the facts. Then he moved to his evidence, and that's when the wheels came off his little red wagon. His first exhibit was the fake red stop work order. He held it up for The judge to see, waving it dramatically. Your Honor, he declared. The defendants brazenly ignored this official order to cease construction issued by a state compliance marshal. Our lawyer just smiled. When it was his turn, he simply called Deputy Miller to the stand. Miller testified that the tag was a forgery, that there was no such thing as a state compliance office, and that the man who delivered it was being investigated for impersonating a public official. Judge Rollins leaned forward, peering at the tag over his glasses. So, counselor, he said to the HOA lawyer, your entire case is predicated on a document your clients forged as part of a criminal conspiracy. The lawyer started to stammer. The color drained from Karen Fraser's face. But it got better or worse for them. The lawyer's big finale was a physical model. He had a lackey bring in a large table with a miniature 2-scale model of our 2 properties. It was like something a kid would make for a school project. The houses were little wooden blocks. His model, however, had a few key inaccuracies. He had made our house look like a skyscraper, and he had placed it directly in front of their house like a wall. He picked up the little block representing our house and showed how it completely obliterated the view of the little painted mountains in the background. As you can see, Your Honor, he said with a flourish, the damage is catastrophic. Judge Rollins stared at the model for a long moment. Then he looked at the official GIS survey report from our expert, which our lawyer had already submitted. He looked back at the toy model and then he started to chuckle. It began as a low rumble and grew into a full-blown wheezing laugh. He had to take off his glasses and wipe tears from his eyes. The whole courtroom was silent except for the judge's laughter. Counselor, he finally gasped, trying to catch his breath. Are you seriously submitting this thing from a dollhouse as evidence in my courtroom? To contradict a certified survey and a laser-generated topographical analysis. The slick lawyer's face was beet red. He had nothing to say. After reviewing the filed exhibits already before the court, Rollins leaned back. He noted the survey, the patrol report, and the chain of custody tabs by number. That was the end. Judge Rollins's good humor vanished, replaced by a cold fury. He didn't even wait for our lawyer to present the rest of our evidence. The videos, the leaked chats, the assault testimony. He didn't need to. This is the most frivolous and malicious lawsuit I have ever seen, he said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. He looked directly at Karen Fraser. You have wasted this court's time. You have terrorized this family, and you have orchestrated a campaign of criminal harassment based on a complete fabrication. He dismissed their case with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. That door is bolted for good. He ruled that the HOA had absolutely no jurisdiction over county-approved building permits. Then he brought the hammer down. He sanctioned the HOA for the entire cost of our legal defense, plus punitive damages. His written order cited impersonation and civil conspiracy statutes by number. He ordered them to pay for the surveyor, the security system, and the lost load of concrete. He referred the evidence of the fake marshal, the assault, the vandalism, and the conspiracy from the chat logs directly to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation to pursue criminal charges against Karen Fraser, Gary, and Ted personally. Your little kingdom, he said, his eyes boring into Karen, stops at Mr. Thornton's property line, and today it has run headfirst into the laws of the United States. I suggest you get a very good criminal defense attorney. You're going to need one. With a final bang of his gavel, it was over. We had won completely and utterly. The slick lawyer just stood there, his mouth open. Karen Fraser looked like she had been slapped. She looked small and pathetic, stripped of all her self-appointed power. We just sat there letting the relief wash over us. Justice, it turns out, is a beautiful view. The courtroom victory was sweet, but the real win came in the days after. Rollins' ruling hit the neighborhood like thunder. The paper ran it. The HOA was shamed. Sanctions gutted their reserve fund, and a special assessment landed on every doorstep. Funny thing about sunsets, people tolerate speeches. They don't tolerate invoices. The cold shoulders thawed fast. The DA moved within weeks. Investigators pulled warrants off our file and Miller's report. The fake marshal went first. Gary's cousin-in-law, broke, scared, and quick to flip. He confessed to name names. Gary and Ted were picked up for assault, vandalism, and conspiracy. Then came Karen. Seeing the news photo of her being led from her porch in handcuffs was quiet satisfaction. No gloating, just gravity. All 3 took pleas. Heavy fines, long probation, anger management, and a permanent ban from HOA boards. The paper called it a cautionary tale in 3 parts. Ego, emails, and evidence. The HOA itself imploded. Their remaining board resigned before breakfast. A special election followed. Neighbors who'd stayed quiet stepped forward. Nate won the presidency by a mile, his first act. A public apology letter to Ava and me mailed to every home. His second cut the check the court ordered. It paid for the survey, the lost concrete, the security system, everything, and shaved a chunk off our mortgage. Without Ava's backups, none of this sticks. We finished the house in the spring. Open windows, wood dust that first night on the floor with pizza and boxes for chairs. The view from the living room was cleaner than any victory speech. But it didn't feel right to leave the neighborhood bruised and quiet. Karen's war had turned folks inward, so we turned outward. On the first day of summer, we threw a block party and called it Sunset for All. No speeches, no grandstanding, just a borrowed speaker, paper plates, and an invite on every door. People trickled in, cautious at first. Then kids laughed, dogs begged, and someone set a bowl of salsa down like a peace treaty. Nate tapped a glass and kept it short. The sky doesn't belong to any one of us. Glasses lifted. Even the old grumblers smiled when the horizon went gold. As the light dropped, a neighbor I barely knew stood beside me and said, "Glad you stayed." I nodded. Me too. What started as a fight over a view had turned into something steadier. Boundaries that meant something. A community that could tell the difference between rules and rulers, and a house that wasn't a fortress anymore. Just a home. Ava leaned on the rail, the deck warm under our feet. For a long minute, nobody said anything. Then the valley lights blinked on like quiet applause. We had faced the bullies. We had trusted the boring power of documents and timestamps. We had stood our ground without losing our humor. And we had won more than a case. We had won the block. We finally had our home.